911 operators, what is that one call that you could never forget? Holly motorcycle tipped over and the clutch lever went into a 4-year-old's eye. Parent was on the line asking what to do. Suddenly, she said, "They're going lift the motorcycle." I emphatically told her to tell them to stop and wait for rescue and EMS. Rescue ended up cutting off the clutch lever and transporting the kid to hospital. She underwent surgery. That was 1982. Just last year, I met the lead rescue officer and the girl herself, now fully grown. They wanted to meet the 911 operator that saved her vision. To anyone reading through the comments, never remove the object from a puncture wound unless it's in someone's airway. I suppose that technically this isn't a puncture, but it's the same principle. I'm a dispatcher for a cab company. One day I got a call from an old man who seemed as if his voice was trembling. I'm naturally polite as I asked for his drop-off address. He said the emergency room. I casually said feeling a little under the weather, eh? I tried to take my life. I vomited most of the pills up and now I feel miserable. Can you send a cab quick? Certainly sir. Anything else I can do for you? I talked to him for 15 minutes before the can pulled up and the driver carried him out to his car. He told me his life story and why he tried to end it. I visited him in the hospital as soon as my shift was over. He still calls for a cab every day to take him to a barbecue restaurant. I had a call that started out pretty dumb, but was actually pretty serious. 911, where is your emergency? 123 Main Street. Okay, what's going on there? I'd like to order a pizza for delivery. Oh great, another prank call. Mom, you've reached 911. Yeah, I know. Can I have a large with half pepperoni, half mushroom and peppers? I'm sorry, you know you've called 911 right? Yeah. Do you know how long it will be? Okay. Mom, is everything okay over there? Do you have an emergency? Yes, I do. Comma, and you can't talk about it because there's someone in the room with you. Moment of realization. Yes, that's correct. Do you know how long it will be? I have an officer about a mile from your location. Are there any weapons in your house? Nope. Can you stay on the phone with me? Nope. See you soon. Thanks. As we dispatch the call, I check the history at the address and see there are multiple previous domestic violence calls. The officer arrives and finds a couple. Female was kind of banged up and boyfriend was drunk. Officer arrests him after she explains that the boyfriend had been beating her for a while. I thought she was pretty clever to use that trick. Definitely one of the most memorable calls. Whoa, I really hope that every 911 operator has the same level of quick critical thinking skills that you have. Very impressive. I'm not a 911 operator, but I spent time doing OnStar telematics type stuff, and the moments you remember are those when you're still connected to the vehicle once the dispatch has been made after an accident. I've heard a brother beg for his other brother not to die as he bled out. Not sure if he actually did. The one that has stuck with me the most is the one I initially heard the least on. Airbag signal, connected to vehicle. I heard a sigh and then silence outside. Nothing but the sounds of passing traffic. A co-worker then completes the dispatch. Standard procedure, and I attempt to make contact a time or two with no luck. It's simply a matter of remaining on the line to listen to make sure the ambulance gets there. Then, a car stops and I hear talking in the background. Soon after, someone else stops. Finally, someone starts a last rites type of prayer after asking someone to join hands. I realize then that what I heard at the very beginning of the call was their last breath. The only time that this person's entire existence crossed mine was at the last possible moment, and they don't even know it. Life is fickle. Be good to everyone. My first call I ever had to dispatch on the radio. 2 homeless dudes blowing each other on the bus. I'm sorry it's not serious, traumatic, but it will always stay with me. This is dispatch. We have a code 69. 2 men exchanging blows. I was a 911 dispatcher for several years, and one of my most memorable calls was a hysterical woman at about midnight one stormy night. She was absolutely incomprehensible. I kept saying, "Mom, Mom, you have to calm down. I can't understand you. Mom." This went on for what felt like forever. I couldn't get anything useful out of her. My officers were en route to this obviously horrifying situation. Finally, she said something about being with her sister. "How old is your sister?" One. Instantly suspicious, I asked, How old are you? 5. A 5-year-old boy. So that's how I inadvertently called a little boy mom many times. Oops. The storm had woken him up and his parents were gone. They went out to move their cars to shelter in case of hail. He was just very scared. My officers still responded and talked to the parents about not leaving sleeping children alone, but everybody was unscathed. It wasn't my most tragic call, but it is one I've never forgotten. Poor little mom. Poor little mom. Hahaha. Excellent story. Not a 911 operator, but volunteered on a crisis call center hotline. I had just turned 18 and was fresh out of training. It was maybe my 8th or 9th shift at the center. It wasn't my first call with a suicidal person. However, it was the worst and scariest for me. This man had locked himself up in his home with a gun and was going to shoot himself. He wasn't calling to have someone talk him down. He told me that he wanted someone to hear him die. Of course, at this point, I'm trying to find out where he's at. I'm tracing his call and talking to 911 on my other phone. He says in the most calm and serious voice, "You're not going to have time for that. Just listen, and it will be over soon." I finally get a trace on the call, and I'm reporting it to the 911 operator. Then it begins. I can hear him fumbling around with the gun, and the clicking of the trigger barrel. He's getting frustrated because the gun is jammed. With each click and rattle, I'm expecting to hear the gun go off. I'm literally dripping with sweat. This goes on for some time, and I'm trying to keep him on the line and to focus on the conversation as he's trying to fix his gun. It seemed like eternity, but I finally heard the police at the door. They had to kick it down since the man refused to open it. They got the gun from him and the call ended. The cops later told us they couldn't figure out why the gun had malfunctioned. That really, he should have been dead. So he was either really lucky, or not, depending on your thought on the situation. Regardless of it, I didn't last much longer as a volunteer. I started having extreme anxiety every time I picked up the phone, imagining that I was hearing the clicking of the gun. I'm 26 now, and I think I am finally in a place where I could do that type of volunteer work again. I used to work as a relay operator, 711, and often got misdialed 911 calls. We would connect them to 911, but since they connected through us, we had to stay on the line. One time I got an old woman who fell out of bed and couldn't get up. I connected her to 911 and from there they tracked her location. The 911 operator is like, "Mom, are you in such and such hospital? Are you calling from the hospital?" "Yes. I fell and no one will help me." Not sure what the 911 operator did, but about 10 minutes later you hear someone come into her room to help her up. Apparently this woman fell out of her hospital bed and no one noticed for over an hour, until she dragged herself to the phone and called 911. I was like, note to self, never go to this hospital. 911 dispatcher here. I took a call once of a house being on fire, so of course we send fire department out. Soon as they arrive on scene they ask for the police to respond. Police don't typically respond to this area with FD. Turns out the story was that a girl's fiance arrives home and dumps gas on her and lights her in fire. She then runs to the shower to try to put herself out. He follows her, turns the shower off, dumps more gas on her and lights her back on fire. She then runs through the house, thereby lighting the house on fire. She then runs out of the house as FD arrives on scene. So when FD pulled up they had arrived to a body collapsed in the yard on fire. When PD arrives, the male fiance walks out of the burning house, lets himself into the back of a police car and says, "Take me to jail." My mom was a 911 dispatcher for over 30 years. She had many crazy calls, but one story she told me always stuck out from the rest. One day a man called in. With a calm voice he told my mom he was in the local hotel and that he had doused himself with gasoline and was going to kill himself. He called in so they could evacuate the hotel because I don't want to hurt anyone else. While my mom is trying to talk him out of it, she is on another line to the hotel letting them know what's going on and to get everyone out. While emergency services are en route she has to stay on the line whenever possible to keep people calm, reassure them help is on the way and to try her best to keep track of what's up on the other end. As soon as the guy heard the sirens coming in the distance he asked her if everyone had been evacuated yet. She tried to stall her answer thinking he'd light himself up as soon as she said yes. Didn't work. Seconds later she stated hearing the worst screams she's ever heard. and she's heard many during that job over the years, and then the phone went static. And then silence. He died in that hotel and mom had to listen. Lousy day. They shouldn't have gone in with sirens on. That's pretty basic. Not me personally, but this is why a friend of mine quit her operator job. About 5 years ago she got a call 1 year into her job about a 4-year-old boy who drank bleach under the care of his aunt. The ambulance was able to make it to the boy and save his life, but it was later found that the aunt made him drink it. She wanted a free ride into town to go to the casino. Very disturbing. TLDR. Aunt almost kills nephew with bleach. Reading this was quite the emotional roller coaster. Jesus Christ. Oh phew. He lived. Jesus Christ. My wife wakes up crying once in a while after dreaming about certain of her calls. It's always either mommy won't wake up or I backed over my boy. She has not been on the job for 15 years. Some things just leave marks. I wouldn't last a day in a 911 call center. The one that stayed with me gave childbirth instructions to a deaf father via relay for his deaf wife. They were the victims of a home invasion and were tied to chairs. Burglars saw her in labor, panicked, then left. Took dad hours to free himself and call. While giving the instructions, I obtained a suspect description to put out to surrounding agencies. They were caught in the city to our north during the call. Baby boy was born perfectly healthy. That's incredible and terrifying. Incredible that it ended well and that they escaped. Terrifying that something like that has happened. Glad it had a good outcome. Former sheriff's department dispatcher in charge of non-emergency and 911 calls for a rural, southern county. I picked up the job part-time and was in the process of training. My supervisor was sitting next to me listening to my end of the call, but she was not hooked into the line to hear the whole call. Line rings. I answer. It's 911. A young girl, less than 10 years old, is telling me that she, her mother, and her baby sibling are locked in a bedroom. Her uncle is pacing around outside the door holding a knife and threatening to kill them all. She does not know the house number, fire number, where they are, and mom has basically checked out of the conversation out of fear. I have a vague idea of where she is, so I send deputies in her direction with the promise that I will get better directions. As is typical in rural areas, everybody owned a scanner and listened like it was their job. My phone starts ringing off the hook, so I am reassuring this little girl on one handset and holding a second handset up to my other ear, taking directions from concerned members of the public. Directions like go until you see a broke down truck. Keep going. When you get to the second broke down truck, turn right and continue until you see a large rock. It was also late enough in the evening that everything was dark out. The little girl tells me there might be a back door that is unlocked. Members of the public who know the house just from the general location and number gender of occupants are calling and confirming that there is a back door that my deputies should enter through and that they will not be seen by the perpetrator if he has retreated to the living room. My guys arrive, sneak in the back, walk right up to the guy sitting in a recliner, disarm him, and arrest him. Family gets emergency protective orders so he, ideally, cannot be a threat to them again. I almost quit after that call because my adrenaline was running. I was shaking, and I'd had to handle it mostly myself because my supervisor couldn't hear what was going on. I stayed with it and it was one of the best jobs I had. I quit when I moved to another state, but it was a sad decision to make. I love the thought of a community pulling together like that to help those poor kids. I am a 911 operator. My favorite call I have personally took that I won't forget is about a couple at McDonald's. They had just purchased a new vehicle and went out to celebrate the purchase at a local MCD. The wife for some reason decided she had better check the spare tire and make sure they had one before they left town and found a gun instead. I received a call from the wife stating she just accidentally shot her husband. When I was asking about exit wound, she said it did not penetrate but burned him real badly. Turns out wife shot the husband with a flare gun when she went to show it to him. They did not finish their Big Macs and I'm not sure how that marriage ended up. He wasn't a happy man on the way to the emergency room to get burn treatment. Accidentally. Before my grandma died we had to call 911 to get her to the hospital. An older lady, for some reason still an EMT, or first responder, I forgot, came to the house. She had trouble getting up all the stairs to the front door and fell backwards. She thought she hit her head, so she touched it and saw blood all over her palm. In reality she just scraped her hands, but thought the blood was from her head, so she fainted. We had to call another ambulance. As a current EMT, what the frick? I used to take calls for community nursing teams, and I'd get one particular lady who would ring me up New Year's Day of a year without fail to make sure I wasn't pregnant. Not this year, Mary, not this year. Actual 911 operator here for a major North American city. Throw away for privacy issues. Also, I can't go into great detail. Worst 2 calls I've ever taken have both been callers who committed suicide while on the phone with me. First was a female who jumped from her apartment balcony while on the phone with me. I heard her scream the whole way down and I heard her hit the ground. I still have nightmares of just the sound of her screaming and hitting the ground. Second was a male who hung himself while talking to me. He said he didn't want to be by himself when he did it, so he called 911. He apologized for what he was about to do, but he wouldn't tell me where he was. We never got to him on time. I had to sit there with an open line and him hanging until the police finally located where he was. You know that sound in the movies you hear when someone has hung themselves? You know, the sound of the body hanging from the rope and somewhat swinging back and forth. That creaking sound the rope makes from rubbing against whatever it's tied to? I had to listen to that sound for quite some time before he stopped swinging. To this day I can't watch a scene in a movie where someone has hung themselves without having a mini anxiety attack and almost throwing up. I've thrown up a few times soon after it had happened. Not 911 operator, but grandma was telephone operator back in the day when operators actually connected calls. First call ever on first day on the job. Kid zipped his junk in his zipper, and this was back in the days of metal zippers. She said she could hear the kid screaming in the background, so she put it through to the fire department because I figured they were all guys there so they'd know what to do. One of my first calls after I finished training, a young girl calls and says I caught my 15-year-old brother with another guy again, but wouldn't give me a whole lot more. I kept asking her and finally she says, well, I panicked and called my dad, and when my brother heard, he drank some Drano, and now he's starting to pass out. So of course the entire cavalry is on their way to her, but I keep her on the line until they arrive. She says that her dad told her to call the police and us, and that he was on his way home too. I was confused as to why she'd have to call the police. Being gay isn't something the police give a crap about. Anyways, he's transported to the hospital, and the police called back to ask where we transported to, and I asked them about the call. They say, oh, for the sexual assault. I was super confused, and they go, oh yay, the guy your kid was caught with was 38. Oh, that's why the police we called. Got it. Kid ended up dying in what turned out to be the weekend of 15-year-old suicides. He was Friday, a girl hung herself Saturday, and another girl dead on Sunday. Hi guys, I actually am a 911 operator. First ever 911 I answered was about a naked man sitting in a bathtub on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere. He was drunk and we still don't know where he got the tub. I'm not a 911 operator, but I used to produce local news, and I got a call one day that a young man had been beaten to death because the 911 operator wouldn't send someone to the scene when people called for help. I got the 911 tape and sure enough, that's what happened. The woman who was calling in was hysterical. The operator was getting frustrated. In the background, you could hear the supervisor saying things like, oh, no, she is not talking to us like that. No, tell her you are hanging up, girl. No. The operator was saying things like, look, either you get it together or I'm not calling this in. You need to get yourself in order. The woman wasn't being rude, but she was crying and then she cursed. She wasn't cursing at the operator, but just, oh, goddamn, they're killing him. Oh, frick. Help. The operator, in a very calm tone, says, Mom, I don't appreciate your language. I'm disconnecting. Call back when you know how to act right. I ran the tape on air. It was big fiasco. The supervisor was suspended, but not fired. The kid died and it was questionable whether responding faster would have made a difference. The operator who was actually taking the call was not disciplined. I can't remember, but maybe because her supervisor was egging it on. This happened in my hometown, which is quite literally one of the most miserable places in the country. Got number 7 on the most depressed cities list. The amount of crazy and just human shittiness I saw there was amazing. It happened 20 years ago or so. My blood pressure still rises when I think about it. I don't think I've ever been so pee off. What petty, crappy people. In fact, I'm getting pee off all over again now. Still affects me. Several things that happened there still makes my blood run cold. I had to get out. It's always the suicidal callers, especially the ones that attempt while on the phone with me. Nothing can describe the feeling of trying to talk someone down, then hearing that gunshot, or them saying they just slit their wrists, or took all those pills, etc. I used to be a police dispatcher. Two stick out. Neither were calls that I directly took, but I heard the audio. The first came at about 3 AM. An older man called a non-emergency number and very calmly, nonchalantly said, "I just killed my neighbor and shot her with a shotgun. You might want to come pick her up." The second was a 911 call from an elderly woman. She called, frantic, because she thought her daughter was trying to break into her house. She told the call taker to hold on and put the phone down. On the recording, you can hear a scream, followed by a thud. Then there's a buzzing sound that goes on for several minutes, then stops. Finally you hear a low roar that slowly builds and builds until it's all you can hear. After about 5 minutes of that, the line goes dead. Come to find out, her daughter was severely mentally ill. She broke into her mother's house, bludgeoned her to death. The thud, tried unsuccessfully to cut off her head with an electric carving knife. The buzzing, then set the house on fire. The roar, the line goes dead when the fire destroyed the phone. The responding officers found the daughter hiding in a park adjacent to the house, covered in blood. I wish I was making that up. Two calls come to mind. First, one the guy sitting next to me received a few years ago. First, we were not primary call takers. The sheriff department dispatchers would answer the 911 calls, then transfer and fire or EMS calls to us. Anything involving law enforcement was handled by the SO. He answers. She says she wants to make an appointment to see Dr. So and so. He informs her that this is 911, and while we can send her an ambulance, we cannot make doctor's appointments. She says she understands. He asks if she would like an ambulance. She says no. She then says that she just wants to make an appointment, and that next Thursday worked fine for her. My partner again informs her that 911 is for emergencies only. He again offers an ambulance. She again refuses. They go in circles for a while, and here's where it gets interesting. Anyone else would have ended the call, but my partner this evening was one of the smartest dudes I've ever met. He's pretty good at putting little pieces together. So instead of ending the call, he asked one last question. "Mom, 911 is for emergencies only. Do you understand that?" She said that she did. He had a sudden thought and asked her if she was having an emergency. She said yes, with an oddly desperate tone to her voice. He then asked her, "Is there someone standing next to you who is threatening you?" She simply said yes, but you could feel a sort of "thank God someone figured it out" tone to her voice. We called the sheriff department back and let them know. Apparently the estranged husband had returned to the house and was threatening her. She was too scared to call and ask for the cops, so she was pretending to call the doctor's office. She's lucky my buddy happened to answer. I have a couple, but the one that takes the cake, so to speak, is this one. So background. I worked in a very busy city, so shooting, raping, robberies etc were not a novelty but a norm. Unfortunately, we were used to it, and I have heard several people die with me on the phone. This lady though, so she calls and says, "My husband has a gun to my head and won't leave them alone, you gotta come quick." She's screaming into the phone, then she puts it down. All I can hear at this point is her yelling at her husband, "But I love you baby," then boom. Gunshot. "But I love you," boom. Gunshot. Something grumbled. "But I love you," boom. Gunshot. So at this point I'm standing up yelling into my little microphone, "Stop saying I love you," and everyone in the room with me now turns and looks at me like I have 5 heads. But I was caught up in the call. Turns out the man walked in on the woman and found another guy in the closet. Said guy ran out of the house, but the woman didn't make it out alive. Freaking Christ. I'm not a 911 operator, but my best friend of 30 years was. I remember him telling me one night about a call that came in from a guy whose friend had been shot. While he got the address and put in the call, the location was on the border between two districts. The shooting occurred on one side of the street, District A, and the kid ran to the other side and collapsed, District B. When he put the location in, the system alerted District A. They kicked the call back because the kid was in District B, so he notified District B. They kicked the call back because the shooting occurred in District A. The whole time, the friend is yelling on the phone that his friend is dying, and my buddy can hear the kid crying out in the background that he doesn't want to die. After a huge delay, District B finally arrives, but the kid is DOA. The really sad part is not the dispute between the two district rescues, but less than 1/2 mile away was another firehouse in District C, but the system wouldn't allow them to request them. One of my first calls, a guy kept saying that he was tired and that he needed help. Every time I would ask what was wrong, he would just dryly reply with, "I'm tired and I need help." I could barely hear him over this loud whirring sound over the phone, like he was holding a blender up to it or something. An officer was sent out to take the call, and almost immediately, we get a call from the dispatched officer saying that the man has a chainsaw and had chainsawed his own legs off. I just assumed that he had an accident and needed an ambulance, but what really stuck with me was that he waited for the police to show up to his house before he chainsawed his legs off. Oh my god. I read an anonymous interview with a man who had body integrity identity disorder of the legs. This is the exact situation he described. He didn't feel like his legs belonged to him, so he called 911 and then chainsawed them off, and got his family to believe it was an accident. I am not a phone operator, but I can remember my own 911 call from when my father died as a kid. I called 911, it was a woman I spoke to. I was on the phone in a complete panic and she was giving me instructions for my mom to do CPR. I remember crying, going silent, and crying again. She couldn't get my dad down on the bed to pull him into position and I started babbling as my mom kept tugging on his shoulders. I remember the person on the other end commanding me to grab him by the feet and pull, demanding I do it and being very forceful to keep trying and that I could do it. I was 16. I never could have moved my dad any other time. He was 300 pounds easy but tall and muscled. But with the person drilling me I managed to heave him down across the bed. I was sore for more than a week afterwards. Yeah, adrenaline. But that person was so wonderful and really encouraged me to manage my strength while my mom sobbed and cried that she couldn't do anything. It was the most traumatic moment of my childhood, but if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have been confident as an adult that I did everything I could. Thank you 911 operator for helping that broken girl do her best. Bless you. Not a 911 operator, but a first responder with a large county fire department. Call went out for the unknown injury. Usually this just means that the caller didn't give enough information to the dispatcher, so we kind of walk in blind not knowing what exactly is wrong. We get to the address given, and it's this large 3-story house that could honestly resemble the Addams family home. This call was around 3 AM. We're led up to a bedroom by a kid who was probably 12 years old. We walk past a bathroom next to the bedroom and see a trail of blood leading from the bathroom to the bedroom. Me and my partner walk into the bedroom and see blood all over the bed and white feather down comforter. There's a female in her 20s sitting on the edge of the bed covered in blood from her neck down to her legs, and the male companion under the sheets also covered in blood. Confused and surprised into what we're seeing, we ask what had happened. The female patient tells us that she and her boyfriend got adventurous in bed. Now, they must have been having sex for a long time before anyone noticed the blood on the bed and on each other. The place looked like someone was murdered in there. The lights were off the entire time. She wasn't sure if the blood was coming from out of her, or if it was coming from him. As my female partner examines the female patient, I take a look at the male patient still hiding under the sheets. I pull the covers off and see a good 1/2-inch tear right down the middle of his shaft. I look over at my partner and I get disgusted as I see the female patient pulling chunks of clotted blood out of herself. Even though we both knew it was the male patient who had the injury, the female patient continued to protest that it was her with the injury inside her. In the end of it all, we took both to the hospital. This isn't exactly anything tragic or scary, but the whole call was just creepy and just weird in so many ways. There was something definitely off between the two. TL. DR walked into what we thought was a murder scene, ended up being blood from a torn shaft of a man's penis after long, rigorous sex. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.